Guys, welcome back to the Relaxed Running Podcast. Tyson Popplestone here. If you're watching, you already knew that. If you're listening, or maybe you know my voice by now, I'm not sure. I don't know how often you listen to this thing, but nonetheless, good to have you guys here. I hope you've had a good week of training. I can't believe it's Friday already. This week's sort of just flown by. Been good down this way. I've done a couple of runs, had a couple of little gym sessions going on, and I'm at the end of the week feeling pretty fit and healthy. Hope you're in the same boat. It's been good getting a chance to chat to a couple of you. It's nice. Some people every now and then who listen to the podcast, maybe you've been listening for a year, they stop by, say g'day on the Instagram inbox. So hello to all of you. I hope I've responded to all your messages because I'm a little bit slack on Instagram sometimes. Anyone who knows me well knows that's true. So if you've sent me a message and I haven't responded yet, I'm sorry. It's not because I don't love you. It's just because, so I would have been a better friend in 1995 before social media was a really big part of our day-to-day lives. So come by, say hello, let me know what it is you're training for, let me know which your favourite episodes are, let me know if there's anyone in particular you would like to hear from on here, because it's always nice it's nice to reach out to other people. I like doing these individual episodes sometimes and reflecting on a sport that I love and trying to take a few nuggets of wisdom from the sport and apply it to not only my own running, but hopefully to yours as well. But I also love that balance between just being able to catch up with athletes and those associated with the sport to try and just boil down some success hints, a couple of little cues that are going to help our running performance improve. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and that was actually the inspiration for this podcast. We were just talking about how it's interesting that there's so many factors from international level athletes, both men and women, which you can see pretty closely. Between men and women of really an elite standard. So I don't know if that made sense. I was essentially trying to say that there's a number of qualities that elite performers have that I think we can glean some insight for our own running. And that's what I wanted to spend a little bit of time doing today, because I think I was spending a little bit of time brainstorming this one and writing out some ideas and having a look at a number of athletes that I really respect, who I'll go over in this podcast in a little more detail. And I think when you look at these athletes, it's amazing that there's such a correlation between, whether it's personality or other running factors and performance. So my goal here through the Relaxed Running Podcast is obviously to equip you guys with tools to make you run faster for longer, regardless of the sport that you're in. I started this for distance runners, but it's amazing how many triathletes and even AFL football crew jump on board and listen to the running element of this. So regardless of which of those areas you're in, I hope you can glean something out of that. But with that being said, my true love is the distance running scene. So this has got a real strong focus on you distance runners out there, and with a real focus on distance runners. So with that being said, I've got 8 things written down which I wanted to go over today. I reckon it'll be about a half an hour podcast or so. And then hopefully, obviously it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's going to be plenty that I reckon you guys could add to this list. But hey, 8's a pretty good place to start. So with that being said, let's jump into the first one, and that is running technique. Running technique, it's so often overlooked. I don't know how long you've been in the running scene for. Triathletes seem to have more of an appreciation for running techniques than just true blood distance runners. And I think the fact for that is, in a sport like triathlon, you've got swimming, which is, if you've got a bad technique as a swimmer, you're not going to swim well. You're not going to get through that water easily. And one of my good friends, Brenton Ford, runs a business. He's a swimming coach called Effortless Swimming. And the idea with that is to teach people efficient techniques to make sure they're using their energy wisely. And I think maybe to a lesser degree, the cycling, maybe not to a lesser degree. I guess it depends on the cyclist that you're speaking to. But cycling has a really big focus on technique as well. So in triathlon, the first 2 out of 3 legs have a fairly strong focus on the technical element, and then you get to a run. So what I find interesting in the distance running scene, I started running back in 2000, the year 2000, and my technique was awful. My technique was absolutely awful. You watch me run, and whenever I got tired, my shoulders would be up around my neck and my upper body would be swaying all over the shop. And I just thought it was the way that it was. I never really had a coach who focused or cared too much on the technical side of running. And it wasn't until I moved back to Victoria in 2000 at the end of 2001 that my first running coach, Joe Carmody, was just obsessed with running technique. And he said, well, yeah, you have a look down at the best athletes, regardless of the distance, And one thing that you notice is, mind. What am I trying to say? Despite a few people who fit outside this mold, it's almost universal that the technical element of running performance is super smooth. So, like Usain Bolt, you have a look at him, and one of the first things that people say is, okay, he's incredibly talented, but you see the way he moves, and it looks effortless. There's something about his rhythm. There's something about his movement which just looks really easy. The same is true. David Rudisha for the 800 meters, the 800 meter world record holder. He's one of the smoothest runners you'll ever see. If you haven't watched him before, make sure you jump over to Google. Have a look at the way that he runs. It's relaxing to watch him. Another guy that we love to see is Hisham El Garouj. He was the 1500 meter, or he is the 1500 meter world record holder. He hasn't been around for a little while now. He's the Athens Olympic gold medalist over 1500 and 5K. Perhaps I'll put him up there with the smooth movers like Hisham El Garouj, with David Rudisha and Usain Bolt. But then we even go further beyond that. You look at the likes of Kenenisa Bekele and even more prominent name at the moment, Eliud Kipchoge. And there's elements in these guys that a lot of us can't put our fingers on. We go, okay, they look fantastic, but what is it about them that we like so much? What is it they're doing so well that we can take away from that? Now, the good news is technique is not something which is just natural, though it is natural. That natural movement comes even more naturally to some than others. But just like learning to touch type or learning to do any skill, running technique can be taught. There's ways that you can look at the mistakes that you're making. There's common mistakes that athletes make and that people make when they're under stress and under fatigue. But then there's also anatomy kind of, not mistakes, but just the anatomical way that we run is different based on who we are, based on the way that we're built. And as a result, it can tend to lead us towards, either a smoother running technique or a less effective running technique when we're under stress, or even sometimes when we're not under stress. We just haven't learned how to handle it properly. So if you've never spent too much time looking at running technique, that's one area that I'm quite passionate about. The members across the AFL membership, the soccer membership, and those athletes that I coach who want it often send through technique videos. So simply sending through a front-on video of them running at different paces, a side-on video running at different paces, and then obviously when you're face-to-face, it's easy to see as well. But if you haven't invested in that, if you haven't spent any time looking at the way that you can smooth out your running technique, shoot me a message if you want to find out whether or not what I'm offering, the technique analysis point of view is helpful to you. Shoot me a message, shoot a few questions through, and we'll have a chat about how it might be beneficial to you. The reason this is important to me is obviously, as I said, when I first started running, technically people looked at me and they're like, Tice, that's horrible. And then I got over to my running coach in Victoria at the time, Joe Carmody, and he saw me run once. He's like, all right, like you've got a project. But more than that, he broke down a number of fundamental elements that I was sort of failing on as an individual. And then just through years of him walking me through who he considers elite runners, and then speaking to some of the best exercise physiologists around Australia, like Dr. John Quinn, who's been on the podcast 4 times, I've really invested in just developing an understanding about what makes a smooth mover smooth. So I was able to apply it to my own running, and as a result, I've been able to apply it to a number of athletes who have taken that step. So really encourage you to consider that. You don't have to look too far to see how beneficial it is for distance runners at the elite level. I would challenge you to find me a distance runner who is technically super ugly when they run. There's not many. There's a couple. Michael Johnson didn't look that pretty, but he was efficient. Do you know what I mean? You can't knock a world record holder. But in terms of prettiness, I would say that 90% of the world records are held by people who you watch and go, oof, what are they doing? What are they doing? So, one to consider. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is developing an understanding of what your distance is. So just like an elite distance runner, they might be good at a couple of different distances. Like you look at a bloke like Craig Mottram, he ran 12:55 for 5K. He ran, 7:32, I want to say, for 3K. He ran a really quick mile. I think there's a particular distance that when you boil it down is your best distance. So David Rudisha, for example, the world 800 meter record holder, hey, he's pretty bloody fast over 400, and I bet he could run a mean 1500, but the real focus for him was was the 800 meters. Same is true for Hisham Al Garouj. It's a crazy example because he ran 7:23 for 3,000 meters, and he would have run 1:44, I'm sure, for 1,500. But he's the world record holder of a 1,500 meters, and he was most widely known as a 1,500 meter miler. So I think we've got to have a look at where our skills and our talents meet our abilities. So where our skills and talents meet our... did that make sense? We want to look at what's going to give us the best chance for performing at a higher level. So maybe you're an 800 meter runner with a little bit of endurance, or maybe you're a 10,000 meter runner who's pretty good over 5K. I'm not saying you can't touch the other events. I'm just saying when we're training, I think it's important to know what our best event is. And you might ask the question, why is that? And maybe it's something that you don't necessarily feel as important to you, but what I think is it really helps our training be a lot easier when we know the one event that we're going for. So if you're going to be a marathon runner, well, it comes with the territory that, okay, well, while I'm training for this marathon, I understand that I'm not going to be the best 800 meter runner in the world because the training is so different. The training hits two different systems in a lot of ways. So if you haven't spent any time trying to understand, all right, like what skill level are you at over various distances, maybe do a little bit of a brainstorm. Now, I'm not saying you can't use other distances as a way to prepare. In fact, one of the guys I'm working with at the moment is training for a marathon later in the year. And as a result, we're using half marathons and hopefully a couple of 10K races to get him prepared for that. Because I think speed's an important factor in training for a marathon. But we understand that our overall goal is that marathon. So if his half isn't exactly where he thinks it might be, or his 10 isn't exactly where he thinks it could be, it's okay because they're all stepping stones towards that ultimate goal. So it just makes planning for your training a lot easier when you know, okay, well, this is what I'm going for. These other ones are helpful steps along the way. But if they're not as good as I thought they might have been, classic example is myself. I always felt like for 1,500, I needed to do some shorter, sharper running, which meant that as a result, I probably wasn't as crisp over 10K as what I could have been if I was targeting that event more specifically. But to break 350 for 1,500 meters at the time was, it was definitely, it was highly likely when I stepped onto the track that was going to happen because my training had been tailored towards that. So still used other distances around it to be able to not only break up the training, give me something else to target, but it also, it just helped my training be rock solid. The third thing that I think anyone who's listened to this podcast and you've paid any attention to the name of what it is that this business is called, Relaxed Running, you'd be potentially sick of hearing me speak about this, but I don't think we can say it enough because it's something that we often ignore, and that's just having a relaxed approach to the sport. Now, obviously, some people are more naturally relaxed. Some people are more naturally uptight. Some people have got to develop that ability to be able to just let go of stress. And it's a popular topic at the moment, whether it's through meditation or whether it's just through getting out in nature or finding out something that helps you switch off and feel good is really beneficial. And I bring this up as well because I think one of the standout factors that I really admire about top athletes, Usain Bolt's a classic example of this, is that they're so incredibly relaxed. Now, I'm not saying they don't feel the pressure of the situation because if you're Usain Bolt and you're lining up to race 100 meters at the Olympics, obviously there's a lot of stress there, especially when you're the favorite for the race, you're the world record holder. But have a look at the guy 5 minutes before the race starts. He looks so free. He looks so relaxed. He's moving so naturally. His heart rate seems relatively low. He's enjoying himself. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to start dancing on the start line of the 1,500 meters, but what I am saying is that it'd be helpful for you to use that energy effectively. So have you spent any time looking into ways that you can actually develop a more relaxed demeanor going into a race, into a training session, or even more broadly, just throughout your day-to-day life? Stu McSwain's a classic example of this. He's got a reputation at Melbourne Track Club of just being a super relaxed guy. And coincidentally, he's obviously very talented as well. But that relaxation, I think, just goes into allowing you to tap into a higher level of performance. So Eliud Kipchoge fits into this as well. There's a number of athletes. Jess Trengove over the marathon's got a reputation for being incredibly consistent over the distance. And he's one of the most disciplined, determined, focused athletes you'll ever see. But also one of the most relaxed athletes on the start line of a race. And I don't think it's a coincidence. So, and it goes bigger and broader than just the distance running scene. I finished listening to a an autobiography. I first listened to Rickson Gracie, who was his dad was the creator of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he speaks about his approach before a fight. It was the same element. He had a big focus on making sure that heart rate was being used really effectively. So when he went into battle, his energy was at a higher level than his athlete, the competitor, the fighter that he was versing, who might have got a little bit flustered and run short of breath. Georges St. Pierre, I'm reading his autobiography at the moment. It's the same story. There's a really big focus, and I don't think it's a coincidence that there is such a big focus on this element of performance, and that is just learning to relax. So spend a little bit of time, if you haven't read about it, looking at what relaxes you. Maybe being out in nature, maybe painting, maybe being at the ocean, maybe going for a run is the relaxation. And then look at ways to deal with stress. I like to practice in stressful situations throughout my day so that when it comes to a time that I'm really passionate about doing well in, it feels more natural to me. So I might have an event come up which I feel relatively stressed, and I like learning to separate the emotional attachment I put to that situation. And man, just ask my wife. It's a roller coaster of a journey. But I just think just having the awareness of the power that comes with those little practices is important. So if you haven't considered that, would really encourage you to do it. The fourth thing that I think it sort of goes hand in hand with what I just said, but I wrote it down as a separate note because I feel as though it's I feel as though, how do you put it? It sort of just ties hand in hand with that. And that's embracing the highs and the lows that come with the sport. Now, one of the most common questions that I get is people shooting me a message and just saying that they're struggling with motivation because, they're putting in the training and they're just not seeing the results. And there's a variety of factors. I'm not saying just ignore the fact that you might be in a lull or your body might be tired, because that's important feedback. Obviously, improvement comes through recognizing the areas that you're failing at or you're not doing as well as you should be at, and making little adaptations and making changes to that. But I think just separating yourself emotionally from the roller coasters that come with performance on a daily basis. I know for me, if I ever go out running with Strava or I go out running with a Garmin, a lot of the time I can still get caught up. I'm 35 now. I've been in the sport for 22 or 23 years. I can still get caught up going, oh man, I'm running, for me, 5-minute pace is okay. Like if I'm around about 5-minute pace for a 10K run, that's usually pretty good. But every now and then I'll go out and you know what it's like. You'll just hit a sweet spot. And for whatever reason, for me on that day, 4:30 feels as easy as what 5-minute pace does. And that gets me excited. I'm not even training for any big race at the moment, but just as a bloke who enjoys running and is passionate about performance, I love that. I love getting home and being like, oh my gosh, like I just ran that 10K in close to 40 minutes and I felt like I was jogging. But then the flip side of that is some days I'll go out and for whatever reason, I feel like I'm running at 5-minute pace. I'll look at my watch, I'm running 5:20s and I go, okay, this is a more difficult day. This is just a day for getting the Ks in the bank. And it's just part of the territory. Now, I've learnt in a big way just to let that be what it is. For whatever reason, maybe there's stress or maybe there's tiredness, maybe there's fatigue, maybe I've been sick or I'm getting sick and haven't quite realised it yet. But there's reasons that your body goes through, different pace levels and different skill levels, and you produce different results. So find out what that is, but also embrace the fact that it's just a part of the running experience. It doesn't matter what level you're at. Every elite distance runner understands that for whatever reason, hey, we go through our highs and lows, and that's an important factor. Now, I've had the blessing of being in this sport for long enough now to know some of the best middle distance runners in the world. They're not exempt from this either. And that's why I raise it, because a lot of people go, oh, I'm obviously not fit, or my training's not working, or, I'm just not cut out for this. No, you are cut out for this. Yeah, this is a sport that you can improve at just as much as an elite level athlete can improve at. This is an area of our running, I should say, that you can improve at as much as an elite level athlete can improve at. So I think when you just learn to accept the fact that these highs and lows are a part of the sport, it takes the stress and the frustration away from that. I think that's a really powerful thing. So make sure if you're a little bit emotional in these situations. Last night I was comparing comedians. I went down to the city, and as those of you who have been around for a while know, I do a fair bit of stand-up comedy. It's one of my big passions. And some people, they'll get up on stage and they'll bomb. And And it's interesting to watch the way they change based on how their performance went. Some of them get down after a bomb and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this again. But then they'll strut around like they're the kings if they have a good set the following night. I say be a little bit more neutral with your approach. Just accept that they're both going to happen. Get feedback from whatever it is that you're in and play on. The next one, number 5, got a few more to go, is get yourself involved in a solid group. Performance just improves when you're in a group of people. And you look at it like a Usain Bolt or an Eliud Kipchoge. I think Kenyans are a great one to look at like this. I think a lot of us here in the West, maybe it's just because of where we are and the not lack of interest, but I think the sheer number of people in Australia per capita who are distance runners versus a place like Kenya is probably not there. But I think an important factor, and one thing that I really loved and admire about top athletes all around the world, is they're a part of a crew. I remember when I was 19, I was trying to break 4 minutes for 1,500 meters, and in my mind, it had become a really big thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I really want to break 4 minutes for 1,500 meters. It's really important to me, but it seemed like a bit of an elusive time. And then I started training with Adam Diddick, who at the time he'd run 3:49, and he was like, mate, it's not that big a deal. Like, it's fine. You'll do it this weekend. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? And I just think having that expectation, or having athletes who are maybe a little bit ahead of where you are or around where you are, it can really push you physically during training to improve, but also mentally. Like the way that Adam spoke to me about breaking 4 minutes for 1,500, I was like, oh, okay. So it's not a bigger deal as what I made it out to be. For those of you interested, he was right. It was that weekend I went out and I broke 4 minutes for 1,500 for the first time. I knew I was in pretty good shape for where I was, but psychologically it was nice to have him in my ear just encouraging me like that. So if you haven't got a coach, if you haven't got a group, consider getting on board. I'm coaching a whole range of athletes from a number of sports with a particular focus on a number of middle distance or long distance runners that I'm working with. I'm more than happy to work with you. If you're a student, I'm happy to talk to you about how it is we can make it work. If you're an international, I'm happy to talk to you about how we can make it work. But the truth is, you don't need to be in Australia to have a coach. As long as you have someone to be able to see your training, to be able to monitor the training, and to be able to just communicate with. I'm fairly loose. I'll leave the conversation part in the hands of a lot of athletes. I'll touch base with them once a week, unless they've specifically asked me for a little bit more. But I just think that relationship between coach and athlete and group is really important, because it can highlight your attention to areas that you can improve. And I just think having that outside voice is really helpful. So if you're interested in getting a little bit of coaching, jump over to Relax Running, shoot me a message. As I said before, I'd be more than happy to work with you regardless of what skill level you're at. The other thing is, these athletes all have hobbies outside of running. Don't just become obsessed with running to the degree that it's your whole life, because then it makes a number of the other factors quite difficult. Like the idea of not being emotionally connected to a sport that is your whole life is much more difficult than being emotionally connected to a sport when you've got interests outside of it. So I don't know. This is not something I can answer for you, but for me, for example, I like going out into nature. I like going out for a surf. I like going out and getting a coffee. I like going to do my stand-up comedy. Obviously, there's a limit as to how much you can do when you're trying to get recovery in, especially if you're an elite athlete. But even for someone who's a community level runner, like if you're working and you're running and that's your whole life. I mean, it's good when it's going well, but it's tough when it's not. So if you can find out something that can just take your mind away from those things, maybe it's photography or drawing or painting or hiking or whatever, spend a little bit of time brainstorming that, because I think it's an incredibly powerful thing to be able to focus. At the risk of sort of repeating another one that I mentioned a moment ago, that is, things just never go perfectly. Now, what I meant by this was Rob DiCastella, he used to have a quote. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but he would say that a lot of people get to race day and they get nervous because it hasn't been the perfect lead up, or they don't feel perfect, or they feel like they might have a niggle. And he goes, he's never been to a race lineup, the start line of a race where everything has just clicked. Don't fall into the illusion that everything has to click into place 100% every time you hit the training track or every time you hit the racetrack, because it's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. It's important to be able to just recognize that this is a physical sport. There's going to be niggles. There's going to be factors in your own life that cause highs and lows in the sport. So embrace that. Things are never perfect regardless of what level you run at. I think when you can learn to accept that, it makes the fact that things aren't going perfectly so much easier to deal with. And the lucky last one, which ties in beautifully and serves as an exclamation mark to all of these points, is consistency is our key. Running has a reputation for rewarding the consistent. Have a look at anyone who's achieving anything in the running scene. Show me someone who's been doing it for 6 months only. I challenge you to find me someone that's only been doing it for 6 months. At an Olympic level, I'm going to say you're not going to find one. At a national level, I'm going to say you're not going to find one. Consistency is our key. Pay attention to how your body's feeling. Rock up daily. Accept the fact that there's highs and lows, and it's the same for all of us, regardless of what level that you're at. If you can keep showing up, where you're going to be in 2 years or 3 years is going to be radically different to where you are right now. Don't get caught up on the 1 month vision where you go, all right, I'm just going to do everything I can for a month and just see what happens, because you'll just break down. You just break down, or at least plateau. Our goal is not for you to plateau in a month. Our goal is for you to start running some PBs and take your whole running experience to a brand new level, both on an enjoyment level and on a time level, on the times that you're running. So, guys, there are a few tips for you. I think it's quite easy to see that these are a big part of any elite athlete's skill set. So a bit of food for thought, essentially. But thanks for those of you who have been leaving reviews on the podcast as well. Really means a lot. Helps the podcast reach more people. If you've been around for a while, jump onto Apple Podcasts. Give us an honest review. As long as it's not brutal. If it's super brutal, just message me so I can improve it. All right. I don't want everyone seeing that kind of feedback. That's embarrassing. Do you know what I mean? But if you've got a 5-star review up your sleeve, run over and do it now. They're more than welcome. You don't even have to justify that one. Even if it's a bit of a lie, I still appreciate it. But guys, I really hope you're enjoying that one. As I said, if you're enjoying these solo podcasts, let me know. If you prefer more interviews, let me know. The podcast is for you guys. It's a little bit for me as well. I enjoy both elements of it. So anyway, that's enough from me. Enjoy your weekend, guys. Happy training. Apply some of these to your running and see how it goes. If you need any help, any questions, any guidance, I'm always here to help. So jump over to Relax Running and shoot me a message. But in the meantime, that's enough from me. Big love, and I'll see you all here next week.